Okay.
I feel like I did when the World Trade Center was attacked. I'm waiting to see.
You're listening to Trigger Warnings, challenging talk radio, featuring John Ross and Chris Smith. Radical empathy, challenging talk radio with radical empathy at its core. This is show number 11. Can you believe it, John?
Hello.
We've been at this a while. John Ross, ladies
We
and
have, you
gentlemen.
know what? I have to say, and hello, everyone. I think, given what happened this week, we are now post-radical empathy.
We're post radical empathy.
Post-radical empathy, yes.
What does that mean?
Well, you and I might be radical empathy, but I think we're in a post-radical empathy era.
I don't see a lot of empathy going on in the streets. I really don't.
Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so trigger warnings, challenging talk radio. This is an independent podcast. This media is sponsored by us to benefit us. This podcast has been distributed on SoundCloud and YouTube and thus benefits those virtual platforms probably more than this benefits us. But here in Trump's America, we move forward and use our voices because that's all we know how to do. And we're proud to say that we were using our voices before the election. And John, I think that's, to me, what happened this week. There's a lot of people in the street right now. And I saw a meme, and of course it was the great Bernie Sanders. And it said, to all those protesting the election, you are 1 year late and $27 short.
Is that what he said, really?
No, that's not what he said, but that's the words that someone put in his mouth via a meme.
You know, my on this broadcast last Friday, so 8 days ago, when I was in our nation's capital, I said, without giving specific numbers, that it looked to me like Clinton was going to lose. And I said that in part because I'm really good with math. Like, I can tell that 3 is less than 6, and that when margins of error in polls, in the best polls, are 2.5, 3.5 points, and one candidate is 2.5, 3 points down, that is what's called a toss-up. That's, I'm good at math. What can I say?
So you weren't shocked. That's what we're hearing.
What's that?
You were not shocked on election night.
No, I am not. No, I mean, well, I'm not surprised. I am shocked. I think shock is different than surprise. And I think there are many dark forces that entered into this, from agents in the New York FBI office to Russia, to Russia, which said, "Oh yeah, we were in contact with the Trump campaign all the time," and the Trump campaign finally, on the day after the election, yeah, we said we weren't, but we were. And so, I think there are a great many dark forces here. And I would even go so far as, and this is not conspiracy theories, that there are so many things that are clearly not right. And I'm not talking about the result. I'm not talking about that Trump essentially has won the election by a margin of about 100,000 votes in 3 states. That's essentially where we're looking at: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. That's where it is. And in fact, those numbers may tighten. Michigan may even go to Clinton if there is a recount that kicks in, whatever. I'm not talking about dark forces in the results themselves. I'm happy to stay away from messing up. But there's enough out there that just doesn't look right in terms of FBI and Russia and WikiLeaks and all that stuff that something tells me that we haven't heard the end of this election yet. That doesn't mean the results will change, but nonetheless, I'm not surprised by the result because the numbers in the polls, and like all the pollsters and the Nate Silvers of the world are taking a lot of heat for this, but they weren't really wrong. They weren't wrong. If they had Clinton up by 2 or 3 points, 4 in some cases, going into the last day of the election to Tuesday, and she's ahead as she is now by a half point. It's about 47.9 to 47.4, and at this call, about 650,000 votes projected to go up well over 1 million. If she's going to win the popular vote by a point or so, that's not off. The polls weren't wrong. The polls were within the margin of error. They might have gotten some of the little state polls off, but we don't really know. We didn't have real good polls in Michigan. And a lot of polls in Pennsylvania down the stretch were 1 or 2 points in her direction. If he won by a point, point and a half in Pennsylvania, that's within the margin of error. Wisconsin, I think the polls were a little better for her, 4 or 5 points. And it's a 27,000 vote margin now. So, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff here. And you know what? Ultimately, people are going off into their corners, into their bubbles, and which is, I think, the last thing that we need to do as a nation, or even as citizens who are political actors, whichever side of the fence you are on. And I've talked too much on this, but do you think there are dark forces yet to be revealed in this election? Or is it
Well, I think there's dark forces. I don't know about they're getting revealed. And I'm trying to decide which is the lesser of two evils. Is it collusion between Trump and Russia, which we have, evidence of, or is it collusion between the Hillary Clinton, campaign and the media, or the Clinton Foundation and the media, or the Clinton Foundation and the Department of State? Which collusion is the worst evils? Because to anybody that's out in the streets, look, I understand. The man said it was rigged, and now he won. So he's saying he won at a rigged game, which is kind of like you went into the casino and you knew that it was going to be a rigged game and you played anyway. And now you're not happy because you lost your money or the outcome wasn't what you wanted. The rigged game is what needs to be protested, not the president-elect. So I wonder if that narrative is going to change. But yes, there are dark forces. There are dark forces, and how and where they came into play, I don't rely on the media to trust us. Do you think this election represented a failure in the Fourth Estate?
Well, you could argue that it represented a failure in the Fourth Estate in any number of ways. But depending on what you want to focus on, I mean, let's be fair. Let's be fair is not the right word. Let's be accurate. We have just elected a predatory person, a sexual predator, who has, we don't know if he's racist, but he certainly capitalized on racism, sexism, a lot of isms, and any other candidate for major office historically who had said or done any one of those things not to mention things that came out every day, would have been gone. I mean, the worst, I was thinking about this, the worst thing, Mitt Romney had the 47% thing recorded on tape, which was kind of the dawning of there is no more privacy. But really, the worst thing he said was when he was at the debate and he made the remark about binders full of women. Now, we all know what he meant. He didn't mean that women came in binders. But that remark in the written said would have been about 400, and it arguably sank his campaign. Trump said stuff like that, punctuated with graphic language and rhetoric and body language on a daily basis for good chunks of the campaign, and it didn't force him out, and it didn't take him down. And so something changed this year, and is that the media's fault? I mean, I think what members of the media said is it's very hard to, when your job is to report facts, when you're constantly reporting, researching things that one candidate says that are completely wrong all the time, you're spending so much time researching what he said wrong, it's very hard to cover what he's saying in the moment. And so, I mean, we have done that, and I don't blame anybody in the end but the voters and the candidate who, even though there were a lot of things going against her, and her gender the foremost of them, still really had no reason, even with all the stuff that was against her, not to win this.
But wait, you know what? Yes, I blame the voters.
Money, organization, whatever.
I blame the voters. I blame the educated citizenry, which is what they're supposed to be, those voters, when they walk in and cast the ballot for the person that they thoughtfully chose and researched and understood. And so, wait a minute, I do blame the media, because when you said on this program, the media is not taking Bernie Sanders seriously. They never vetted him as a candidate. And then it became pretty clear that whether or not the media ever vetted Trump as a candidate, they were interested in using his face, name, and words to make money and get ratings, right? And Trump himself said that in the debates. He really threw the media under the bus then. And that was early on, right? So now I'm wondering, to what extent should I have trusted the media to vet anybody? They didn't vet Hillary Clinton. Maybe they did in the early 90s, the mid 90s, the late 90s. But we were vetting this image of a person that we've known for decades. And for Trump, it was never worth the media's while to hold him up to the scrutiny he deserved, or call him out for the racist and the sexist pig that he is.
Well, he was called out. I mean, the Access Hollywood, whatever that show was where he said that stuff, it was constant. You didn't stop seeing it. It didn't matter. It didn't matter because either there was so much vitriol stored up and directed at the establishment candidate, or some people just felt that it was time for a change. And, I mean, we can speak specifically articles. There's the New York Times article I shared with you about women who voted for Trump.
You want to go there? You want to go right there?
Well, I don't want to.
You want to have a directed conversation? I just wanted to whine for a few hours.
I'm using this to support some point. I mean, that's the only reason why I put these out. This one was in yesterday's New York Times from the 10th. Cheryl K. Stolberg, the women who helped Donald Trump's victory. And this is a very balanced piece about professional women in swing states, most of them, Pennsylvania, Florida, et cetera, who voted for Trump. And many of them expressed they didn't like the things he said about women, et cetera, but they voted in their self-interest. What they leave was their self-interest. and the um, the bubbles we live in. I mean, I mentioned it to you earlier in the week, but I'll summarize here. I went to an election party the other night here in Chicago, and all well-educated people and professional people and lefty people, and there was complete shock in the room. How could this possibly have happened? When I went over there, it was about 8 o'clock Central, and Florida was not looking good. North Carolina and Ohio weren't looking good. And I had said that if Clinton had to win one of those, because if she didn't, she was going to lose one of the others that she wound up losing, and that was the election. And I didn't really want to be there. But, I mean, not only did I hear people who were just completely and understandably shocked, how could this possibly happen? But, then they get very angry. They start cursing and swearing at the people who voted for Trump. And, and that includes a lot of these women, and as straight white men, you and I consider ourselves enlightened. We think Trump is disgusting, what he stands for, who he is. But, 53% of white women voted for him. That's a lot of people. I mean, 15, 18 million, 20 million women, white women voted for him. Does that make them anti-female? Does that make them sexist? I think it's very easy to write off the people who voted that way as bigots or racist or intolerant or whatever. And no doubt, many of them are. But people vote on what they perceive to be their self-interest. And
I was about to say, those women are fitting the American mold in voting against their self-interests. That's exactly what happened. They bought an image, right? There's that in this New York Times article. There's a quote from Kellyanne Conway right before Trump took her on, and Kellyanne Conway said in an interview, quote, "People no longer hear, 'Do you want a woman to be president?' They hear, quote, 'Do you want that woman to be president?'"
Right.
That's what happened. That's what happened. And these women who voted for Trump looked at the two candidates and could not trust Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and again, I didn't say they vote for their self-interest. I said they vote for what they perceive to be their self-interest. And, Trump is going to have trouble fulfilling the promises he's made. Good luck finding real jobs in coal where, for all the subsidies that have been put in places, in the Appalachians, where most of the coal mining is done in this country, the number of jobs continues to fade away. Good luck bringing some of these jobs back. I mean, so now he has to, and he as someone who's not a politician, he has to think about this and actually deal with it. That I don't know where those jobs are going to come from unless we annex China or something. Because he has to fulfill these promises. You think he's going to actually build a wall?
Hey, was fulfilling his campaign promises ever part of the plan? Ever?
Well, what I'm going to be very objective here and say, if whether you like it or hate it, I think it's much easier for an average voter, whether that's an educated voter or a lower information voter, to grasp and assess, simply enough to articulate it, Trump's message and brand than it was Clinton. Trump's brand is things are bad. We're on the verge of being taken over and invaded, and we're losing jobs. Now, the evidence doesn't necessarily point that out. But he did a very effective job of establishing that message as a perception to 47.2 or 3% of the population, of the voting population, that was the case, and a lot of that was directed at the establishment, and Hillary Clinton is a symbol of that. Many people. For some people, it came across in dark tones, racial tones, nativist tones. We don't know if he believes that stuff, but he did a very effective job of saying, here are the three things that I stand for. You like it, vote for me. You don't like it, the hell with you. You're not going to vote for me. And that, that is kind of maybe overly simplistic, but that grabs people and what they're voting for. And the essence is in the other article I sent you from the National Review. I don't think the title is right. That the title being this. This is David French from the National Review. Dear America, this is important. Trump did not win because of racism. I don't think it's an accurate title. What he's getting at is that the percentage of white voters who voted for Trump this year was no different, no greater margin than the percentage that voted for Romney 4 years ago. It's that more of them turned out and fewer non-white voters turned out. The margins were similar. Clinton got her numbers in Philadelphia. She got a 460,000 vote margin in the city of Philadelphia. She got her, significant margin in Pittsburgh. In fact, she got the top 7 counties in Pennsylvania. She had an 800,000 vote margin. And then she got whitewashed the rest of the state. So the essence of this, it's very easy to say it's racist. It's this. The reality is she couldn't turn out the Obama coalition like he did. And in some places where she couldn't turn out, where the minority population, like Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, for example, Ohio, wasn't very large, she lost a lot of the people, the steel workers, the conservative Democrats, the union households, the rural folks who voted for the black guy. I mean, if you look at the maps and, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin especially, you look at the maps from 2012 to this year by county, she lost 8, 10, 12 counties. Obama won, like Green Bay. Obama won Green Bay by 5, 6, 7 points. She lost by 20. So in places where there aren't a lot of minority voters, she didn't turn out enough of them, like in Florida, like in North Carolina. And in the places where there aren't a lot of minority voters, she didn't get the Obama coalition back, which included a lot of rural white and a lot of, white working class, fairly conservative, independent or Democratic voter. I mean, that's the real, and the only difference is she didn't get the 110,000 of them she needed in 3 states to win. So while my heart goes out to, because I happen to be married to somebody to whom this applies, well, my heart goes out to people who are devastated and crestfallen and who are legitimately concerned. Women of color, women in general, people of color, people of non-Judeo-Christians, where I understand they are legitimately fearful of where things are going, of how people on the street are going to look at them, how they're going to be treated by the political system, which is another issue altogether. The reality is that a lot of that group did not show up and vote at the level it did 4 years ago and especially 8 years ago. And that is why we have President-elect Trump. Because that's not the only reason, but that's the numerical reason why we don't.
The night before the election, I was watching the video feed of the crowd at a Pennsylvania Trump rally, and I mused on my blog. And if you want to check it out, fearandloathing2016.blogspot.com, a project that's now complete. But it was the night before the election, and I'm watching this crowd, and I said, if Trump wins, he's going to be the last white president. So you don't think it's as racial as that?
I think there are elements of that. I mean, his coalition is older and whiter. His coalition is that is the Those are not all Republicans, but the Republican base is older and whiter. I don't think that means there won't be any more white presidents after him, but you got it. I mean, look, he pulled the inside straight. He won every place he had to win, and he found places that nobody thought. I mean, nobody was talking about Michigan until 4 or 5 days before the election. Clinton took it for granted in the primary because the polls said you can take it for granted. She took it for granted here, or when she finally stopped taking it for granted, it was too late. She didn't take Pennsylvania for granted. They loaded Pennsylvania, and they still didn't win. So I don't necessarily think this means he's the last white president. I think it means a lot of things, and we should probably talk about the Obama legacy going, over the next several weeks. But what it means is that Obama is a pretty exceptional candidate, not just Democrat, that he changed the faces of the people on the bills, but that he has a unique personality, persona, and ability to grab voters.
Who, Obama?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
What happened?
Well, he wasn't on the ballot, obviously.
No, but I mean, he tried as hard as he could. He tried more than any sitting president ever.
I agreed.
So I'm not sure I buy it.
They weren't voting for him. Obama's approval rating yesterday, 58%. So that means roughly 10% of people who think Obama's great didn't vote for his designated successor. They're not voting against Obama. They're not punishing him. They're voting against the candidate. I mean, in certain ways, branding is very interesting here. How many surrogates who weren't related to him did Donald Trump have going around the country for him?
All right. That's enough. You're listening to Trigger Warnings, Challenging Talk Radio, with radical empathy at its core. John Ross and Chris Smith. John, give Hillary, please. We need to be thoughtful. And I'm not going to say we need to move on. I'm not going to say we need to power through. I'm not going to use any figurative language at all. But I am going to embrace a metaphor and ask you to give the Hillary Clinton campaign a letter grade, an old school A through F. How well did they do? That's everything. Everything. Every action, every press conference, every server, every email, every word that came out of her mouth, every stumble, every non-stumble. Give her a letter grade.
They didn't win. C-.
Aw, that's very nice of you.
No, I know they could get an F because if everything,
okay.
If it's pass-fail, they failed, right?
Right. No, but I was putting it on that strata, and I'm gonna say D-, right? I heard that she was spotted walking in the woods, post-election, I think. I don't know. It's
someone to a voter and they took a selfie. They got a lot of play. Yes.
Would you do that if you were taking a walk alone in the woods and you saw the former Democratic nominee? Would you tell her you would give her a B- for the job she did? Would you try to take a selfie?
First of all, I said C-.
Oh, C as in Christopher.
No, I would look. I admire her. I don't think she's a great candidate. I admire her, and I would probably stop and talk to most political figures. Would I tell her she got a bag? I think she knows. I mean,
do you think that selfie in the woods was staged?
I don't know. I don't care. I mean, she gave, by all accounts, a wonderful confession speech. I mean, I think Hillary Clinton would have done better in this race. And I said this when she ran against Obama, and it really is no different. She's not a very good chief executive. She put so much stock in her loyalists, and she builds such a bureaucracy, such an insular core of loyalists that, and even with all that, we people say, well, we don't know who she is. People who meet her, who know her personally, say she's warm, she's friendly, she's funny. That doesn't come across as a candidate. And ultimately, it's on her. But my guess is that if she had run a campaign like Trump did, where she didn't have 7,000 surrogates, all of whom were better speakers and more inspiring to the target audiences than she is, we might have different results. If she had run the Trump campaign where she just went out and said, I'm going to have a bare bones staff, and I'm going to go out there and say what I think and whatever, I think we might have different results. Walter Mondale, one of the worst presidential candidates ever, was famous for saying or having this said about him was that he dared to be cautious. Mm-hmm. I think Hillary Clinton dares to be cautious.
Hey, let's just get this in here and get it out of the way. How badly would Bernie have kicked Trump's ass?
I don't think, I told you this, Bernie would not have won this election. You
don't think so?
He would have been demonized. First of all, he would have had Bloomberg in the race. Bloomberg would have anteed up and thought he could have won because he said he would have run had it been Trump versus Sanders, and I believe that. Sanders would have been demonized. The word socialist, communist would have come out. They would have vetted him and his wife's performance as a college administrator.
Oh, right, as well as they ever vetted Trump. You're right.
No, but it's different. I mean, again.
No, how is it different?
It's different because he's a public figure. He's been in public office.
They didn't vet Hillary.
I don't say it's right. Now, she was vetted. The New York Times and Washington Post vetted her. They vetted her.
They're vetted. I believe some of their hardest scrutiny of her as a candidate came in response to data that people had to deal with. They had to deal with it. It was in front of their nose. And then suddenly we had to ask hard questions about her. Otherwise, the media stood with her. She got a standing O at the press at the Washington Press Corps when she appeared there.
But it was the New York Times that uncovered the email, the server. And the New York Times covered it and played it and did what a good news organization is supposed to do.
I agree. There have been good and bad players in this campaign season, and some of them have been good one time and bad another time.
But I look. Well, what I will say about Bernie Sanders now, and he actually said the other day he may run in 4 years. What I will absolutely say is, and I don't think he would have won this election, but that's academic. Absolutely, the Democratic left, the passionate, progressive, left wing of the party, Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, whoever else you want to put in there, clearly should stand up and is standing up and saying, okay, we stuck with you. You lost. We were good troopers. We went with you feverishly. Now it's on us. So, where things are, Tim Kaine clearly becomes the heir apparent, given history and tradition, so that may not mean anything. The Republicans are going to try to knock him out of the Senate in 2 years, and they got about 24 other Democrats to knock out. They might try to get rid of Warren, but I don't think Kurt Schilling, an old baseball player, is going to take care of her.
Are you kidding? Look at what just happened to a celebrity. The man has never held elected office in his life. He was elected as the apprentice. Kurt Schilling will kick her ass.
No, not in Massachusetts.
I don't know. Not in Massachusetts. You're right. But I fear celebrities at this point. I fear celebrities with political aspirations. Because they could win. They could be as dumb as dirt, and they could win. All right, you're listening to Radical Empathy, Challenging Talk Radio. John Ross, Chris Smith. We've so far talked about the National Review and the New York Times. And John, piece of punditry, who said this? I must confess that over the last few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the black man's great
Can I
stumbling...
buzz now?
Huh?
May I buzz in now?
You're gonna interrupt me? No, let me get it out. Let me get it out. It's not Wolf Blitzer, okay? I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the black man's, I'm saying black man instead of Negro, black man's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizens counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice.
That is a letter from a Birmingham jail.
It is.
Yeah.
Do you feel that is relevant today in Trump's America?
Well, I don't think the word moderate applies, although on the relative scale, where the traditional liberal is now is probably more like where the moderate was 53 years ago when that was written. The bubble that I talked about the other night, the bubble that I saw in Washington last week with people, urban, well-educated, high-income people refusing to answer questions on a panel because they refuse to even entertain the possibility that Trump could win. That is kind of the fat and happy, well-educated, urbane populace I believe Martin Luther King, at least in part, was referring to.
And those people still exist.
Well, they're not moderate, but they're
Trump voters.
They're people who in the 60s might have been activists and marchers and freedom marchers, but who then went to college and got jobs and became the somewhat fat and happy baby boom. So I'm not being critical of them. The accomplishment is great, and job security and having a family and all that. That's important. But I think that's what he was referring to. He wasn't referring to the rednecks or the uneducated whites who were supporters of George Wallace, whether they were in Alabama or Maryland or Michigan. He was referring to the well-educated, mainstream whites who, were fairly liberal on social issues and et cetera. So, he's kind of talking about what we would call today a lot of the urban bubble of the left and the center left. So I think it's applicable. You? You gave me the quote, so you must agree.
Yeah,
with that,
yeah, and I bring up that quote because I saw it this morning on a friend's Facebook feed, and so last week I said doomsday device. I didn't call the winner of the election, but I did say there could be a doomsday device, and John started the show out this week with describing something like dark forces. So here it is. Here's the doomsday device that I think might be on the table. You need those white moderates, or you need people. You know what? You could take race out of it. You need people who are, quote, more devoted to order than justice. Right? That's who you need. And I fear that's how Trump got elected. I fear there are more of those people out there than we ever knew. More devoted to order than justice. In that New York Times article, there's a woman that they're trying to characterize the women that voted for Trump and mention, they're very concerned about violence against the police on the streets, and I understand that.
I understand it.
Okay, and I believe that if you're concerned about violence against the police, then that could lead to being more devoted to order than to justice. Well, you need those people, and you need dark forces, as John described. And I don't think there's anything darker than the military-industrial intel complex. I think the lockdown of Boston during the Boston bombers and the search for those guys, um, I fear the militarization of our cities. And I fear that it would be lucrative to dark forces to lock down the cities. And if you'd like a military escort to Walmart, then you can get a pass. I don't know how many nights of violence we're going to have against the president elect. The peaceful transition to power is important. You want to stand in the street, you want to have peaceable assembly. These rights have to be respected. They are not being respected. Every single politician is looking the other way. None of them have said anything about it. Mr. Nobel Peace Prize better speak up and tell people to calm the hell down, because I don't know how many more swastikas we need to see spray painted on schools, churches, buildings before these dark forces could come into play.
But why do we want to tell people to stop protesting?
Don't stop protesting, but if they don't keep it civil, I don't know if you saw the report from Anonymous yesterday, but CNN interviewed a protester who was jumping up and down, screaming like a maniac, a white man screaming like a maniac about the Electoral College, and just ranting to the black anchor person. Well, at the end of the segment, they cut back to the studio and they kind of admit that, oh yeah, I know that guy, that protester. He used to be my cameraman. That alleged protester is a CNN employee, currently on the books. They grab him and they say, look, you're going to pretend to be what, representative of the crowd that is standing behind us. I don't know why CNN would do that, and I don't know what their strategy is in that, but I would only have to think they're being told to do that. I don't think they're coming up with that on their own, but there's something against their interests in going to ask an actual protester who may be peaceably standing on the street, standing against sexism and bigotry. So I don't know. Thank you for bringing in the dark forces. That's really helpful.
My pleasure. My question is, and it sounds like what that Bernie Sanders meme you referred to may be getting at is, I hope that every person who's marching in the streets, legitimately marching in the streets, protesting. In Chicago here, they got in front of Trump Tower. They went out to Lakeshore Drive. They're kind of, it looks like a samba line because they're kind of zigzagging all over downtown. I hope every person who's marching in these demonstrations, wherever it is, voted. Because if you just get up and say, I don't like the candidate, crooked Hillary, whatever, you have the right to protest, but I think that your value, your contribution is very different, if you feel this way. Because, obviously, from the New York Times article, from other things, we're seeing a lot of people, including a lot of core Republicans, very uncomfortable with Trump, who, in the end, said, I don't like a lot about him, but I'm voting in my self-interest, or what I think my self-interest is, and I'm voting for him. And they say, I'm not staying home. Of course, you have the right to vote for whomever you want, or not to vote for whomever you want. But this election is testament to, if you care, get out and vote, because we had roughly 58-60% of eligible voters, of registered voters, turned out. About 50% of eligible. Clearly, the people who were Trump supporters, especially people who had voted twice for Obama, they were more excited, and they cast their vote. And again, if 58% of the population says Obama's doing a great job, and only 47% voted for his designated successor, the math is hard to do, 20% of the people who support him at least aren't voting for his successor, his designee. So, I just hope that all those people who are protesting, peacefully or angrily or whatever, I hope that they voted. Because
I think that there's got to be, I'm thinking about two different crowds, the Occupy crowd and the Tea Party crowd. And both of these are insurgent, grassroots, anti-capitalist, maybe something like that, at least anti-current economy protest movements. And in both of those, the Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement, there had to be people who, at one point, they supported those movements and then decided to go for Trump. Probably more Tea Party supporters went for Trump, but there had to have been a handful of real crazy mofos in the Occupy movement who thought Trump was going to be the upstart that we need. But now, out of those two crowds, I wonder how many are marching in the streets against Trump. The Occupy movement, former Occupy people, and former Tea Party people, now in the streets marching against Trump.
And in fact, the only politician, and I may be wrong, but you said nobody talked about it. The only politician I noticed who commented on the protesters was the president-elect, who one night said, "Gee, I had a great meeting with Obama today. It was so nice." And then these professional paid protesters come out, not nice. And then somebody said in his ear, "That's probably not a good idea." And the next morning he said, "This is great. I love that they're protesting. God bless America." So here's what I'm going to ask you a question. Does the left, or the remnants of the Occupy movement, need to be essentially a left-wing Tea Party? Is a left-wing Tea Party movement needed now?
No.
Really?
No, I would like to see Howard Dean become the nominee. I'd like to see Chelsea run in 2020. I think it's her turn.
Chelsea, yeah.
I'd like to see the Dems go quietly. No, dude, I can't get behind the Democratic Party whatsoever. The most joy I felt politically this week, and I did not repost it on my Facebook page, as snide and as indignant as it was, I did not repost the article about the man that stood up in the DNC meeting on Thursday morning and screamed at Donna Brazile. Screamed and said, "I'm going to die of climate change because of you," and stormed out of the room. I have no respect for the Democratic Party. I believe Howard Dean is going to take the chairmanship.
Bernie Sanders, but Bernie is supporting Keith Ellison.
But wait, what do we know about the Democratic Party? I think they do whatever the F they want. They have, and they will continue to. Doesn't matter who screams at them. Give it another week or two. And I think by this time next year, you're going to see the darling of the left, Chelsea Clinton, come out of the woodwork, and everybody has forgotten. They will have forgotten because we will have been more battered than we are this weekend.
No, actually, the word is that this came out the day after the election, that Chelsea is being groomed for a suburban New York congressional run in 2 years.
I know. And if you can put a trained SEAL behind a podium to talk against Donald Trump, she's going to have easy pickings. This is the beginning of her blissful career. And I fear, I don't want to demonize the left. I don't want to yell at Hillary Clinton supporters. But my biggest fear is that everybody forgets and we all go with Hillary. Because we all go with Chelsea because we are thrilled. We are thrilled about our political dynasty. I know too many old leftists that would go that way. And I fear that. Right?
It's over. I didn't send you this article. It just came out. in the Vanity Fair today or yesterday, the fall of the House of Clinton, how a political dynasty lost its way. It's over. Maybe Chelsea will run for Congress, but it's over.
Well, you only begin by running for Congress. Hey, you're here.
I don't.
What?
I don't know if Obama's legacy. I don't know if Michelle Obama, as many people want, is a candidate. I do know, and this is very interesting because this has come out this morning, and I hypothesized about this Thursday, that the Obama-Trump meeting at the White House, which was supposed to be a 10 to 15-minute photo op, became an hour and a half apparent love fest. And then the reports came out yesterday that, in fact, what Obama was spending so much time talking about is Donald. You know, there's some fundamental elements of the Affordable Care Act that most people like that you might want to keep, and maybe you make some changes and then you brand it as your own. And Trump said, at least in one interview last night, yeah, I like keeping your kids on your insurance. I like, not being able to get kicked out because for lifetime coverage, because you hit a lifetime limit. I think out of respect for the president, I might do that. Now, I don't know if I believe it, but what that showed is, one, that Obama did his homework, cast his ego aside, and said, well, this guy likes to be complimented. He likes people to say nice things to him and about him. Maybe if I try to charm him a little bit, irrespective of everything else that's gone on, somewhat of my legacy is preserved. Now, I don't know what's going to happen January 20th. I think there may be darker forces than Donald Trump's ego, even, that are going to be in play, because it sure looks like the Republican mainstream just said, oh, wait a minute, it's like Pac-Man, right? They've been running away. They've been running away from the fruit, all the Pac-Men. And then all of a sudden, the Pac-Man ate everything in sight, and they're going to run to the Pac-Man because they, wait a minute, we've got control of everything. We can do whatever we want. Let's embrace him. But I did note that, and what it's showing is that, well, one, that Obama has a lot of class. The Obamas just a lot of class. They're 36 hours after the election, they're hosting the Trumps at the White House, and everything's nice.
Do I have time for a bathroom break while you rave about the Obama legacy? I think I do.
No.
I'll be right. I'll be back while John Ross talks about the Obama legacy.
I'm gonna stop.
Go ahead. You're listening to Trigger Warnings, Radical Empathy, where we're embracing the embraceable.
Post-radical empathy.
No, I insist. Oh,
no.
I can't continue unless that's still our theme. Because empathy itself, I don't know when the last time was that you were in Atlantic City, but empathy is not the word that comes to mind as you walk the boardwalk, okay? And here in Trump's America, hey, all right, you're listening to Trigger Warnings, and we're gonna take a quick break, but we'll be back with more. There's nothing that's wrong in Trump's America. Politics. All right, you're listening to Trigger Warnings, challenging talk radio, radical empathy at its core here in Trump's America. He's John Ross, and I'm toast. I am toast.
You're going back to Vermont.
Of course, we're all going back to Vermont.
I mean, we're both in very safe islands of blue. I mean, actually, right now, I feel much better being at least in a blue state and in a blue city because, I understand how people feel like there's reason to be scared and wary and all that. I clearly do.
Yeah, no, I'm rallying for. I'm putting better odds on an influx of political migrants to Vermont than I am a successful ski season. Thanks to climate change. Thanks Obama. Thanks Trump. Thanks to everybody here on Challenging Talk Radio, trigger warnings. A lot of people have been trigger warninged this week, John. A lot of trigger warnings issued.
We think the whole election was a big trigger warning.
Classes were canceled, exams were canceled, students walking out of high schools. It's really quite something. Well, I've got 2 articles. John, did we get to your 2 in due process?
No, we've gotten to mine. I did not wish to read them. I just wished to refer to them as, empirical sources for my, please.
All right, well, then let's tackle the hard stuff here, and that would be Peggy Noonan, writing in the Wall Street Journal. I saw Peggy Noonan on election night. She was sandwiched between 2 men, and they were talking, and Charlie Rose was doing the interviewing, and she looked stunned, and she wrote about it here in her piece. I'm tempted to read it all. John, should I read it all?
That's up to you, of course.
I'll read the beginning anyway, because it begins with a quote from a poem by Stephen Vincent Benet. Sometimes there comes a crack in time itself. Sometimes the earth is torn by something blind. Call it the Moors, call it the God, or fate. That force exists and moves. And when it moves, it will employ a hard and actual stone to batter into bits an actual wall and change the actual scheme of things. Hand it to him, the hard and actual stone, who changed the actual scheme. There were not actually many stones, some 60 million, but Donald Trump did it, battering not just the famous blue wall, but a wall of elites and establishments and their expectations. The moment for me that will never be forgotten, I was in a busy network green room late on election night. We were scrolling down, noticing margins in various battlegrounds, looking for something definitive. Then someone read aloud from his phone. AP calls it, Donald Trump elected President of the United States. There was quiet for just a moment. I wrote in my notes, 2:32 a.m., 11/9/16. Soon we went into the newsroom for a panel, and I said what I thought, again from my notes. We have witnessed something epochal and grave. It is the beginning of a new era whose shape and form are not clear, whose personnel and exact direction are unknown, but something huge and incalculable has occurred. God bless our beloved country. She blows me away, this Peggy Noonan, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
The article ends. I'm going to skip ahead, but I draw your attention, dear listeners, to Peggy Noonan's article. You can find it online. It is titled "What Comes After the Uprising." She establishes some categories at the end, and I'm jumping to the last section of it. Many fear they will be no longer respected. They need to know that things they rely on are still there. They don't understand what has happened and are afraid. They need and deserve reassurance. I feel like that's really addressing the protesters before they were there in the streets. Noonan says, Trump apparatus find a way. The president-elect should make a handful of appointments quickly, briskly, with an initial emphasis on old hands and known quantities. Ideological foes need not be included, but accomplished Washington figures, especially those from previous administrations, should be invited in. It is silly to worry that Mr. Trump's supporters will start to fear he's gone establishment. They believe in him and are beside themselves with joy and will understand he's shoring up his position and communicating stability. Let me pause there. John, is this the case? Accomplished Washington figures, previous administrations, old hands, known quantities.
Well, to some degree. I mean, he is. If you look at the transition team and all the people, because I sent this to you yesterday, and it came out who the people running the transition affairs in all of the policy areas of who they are.
Yeah, you want to give us that rundown?
Well, their names we don't really know, but they are people who had, who spent the last 8 years back, lobbyists or lawyers. I was particularly interested in the healthcare one. The person who's in charge of healthcare reform was a high-ranking counsel at Health and Human Services under Bush, and then went to one of the top shelf law firms in D.C., and now she's going to be running the healthcare reform transition. So, I mean, the people who are looking at the nuts and bolts policy formation and, deputies, undersecretaries, the third, fourth levels of political appointments, they're the old hands who have experience, have been in Washington. A lot of lobbyists have been brought in to run things. The energy lobbyist, the oil lobbyist is running energy. Mike Pence is now displaced Chris Christie running the whole transition team. Mike Pence is an insider. Giuliani, Chris Christie, Gingrich certainly are insiders. And a lot of them, the loyalist members of Congress who, stuck up and stood up for him, have some pretty prominent roles. So, I mean, Steve Bannon is not running the transition team. We don't know what Steve Bannon's going to do. But the old hands, people with experience in Congress, in the executive branch, and lobbying are on the top of those. So, I mean, it looks very much like what President Romney or President McCain would have had, or President Bush did have. Why not?
Peggy Noonan says...
Now, the foreign stuff we don't know yet, and that's the real big issue. I don't think on the domestic side there's going to be any issue with him bringing in old hands. The question is who on the foreign affairs side, the diplomatic, the intelligence. What I've read about that is that there hasn't been much going on in terms of transition at the Pentagon and at the CIA and in the Homeland Security area. That is a place of concern because no Republican ran with him. They all abandoned him from the on that side of the ledger, and that's going to be a real issue.
Yeah, Peggy Noonan calls for those people that you're talking about. They wouldn't advise him during the campaign because of the stigma he carried as a barbarian and likely loser. It might damage their stature. Better to watch him go down in defeat and continue their career as big brains in exile. But these former officials, semi-quoting, and true experts with esteemed backgrounds who need to be told, help him, says Peggy Noonan, who, John Ross, has yet to come out of the woodwork to help the president-elect. And who should?
We don't have we don't have enough time.
We don't know yet.
Anybody from Dick Cheney to Condi Rice to any one of hundreds of Republican and conservative, including neoconservative intellectuals, administrators, thinkers, etc., who refuse to support him. And I really do appreciate this, and I appreciate what she said at the end.
Yeah, let me read that and get these categories established, please.
Yeah, that's important.
A Trump administration will be populated by three kinds of people: loyalists, opportunists, and patriots. The loyalists earned their way. To the victor belongs the spoils. Back a long shot for president, and you'll get a mid-level office in the executive office building. The opportunists have a place in every administration. They spy an opening, have a friend who has a friend, wind up as undersecretary to the assistant secretary. That's life among the humans, especially the political humans. It is the patriots who matter, many of whom kept away from Mr. Trump in the past. They are needed now. They have heft, wisdom, experience, and insight. Donald Trump doesn't know how to be president. He isn't a reader of the presidency. He's never held office. There is little reason to believe he knows how to do this. The next president needs you. This is our country. Help him. Again, that's Peggy Noonan writing in the Wall Street Journal. Check out her complete article, What Comes After the Uprising. Jon, we've got loyalists, opportunists, and patriots.
Yeah, look, I think this is, as I said to you when you sent it to me, this was stultifyingly and crestfallenly beautiful. Um, and I mean, you wonder exactly to whom she's speaking. Now, you and I, who by no means are people who would be at the top of a profile for an appointment for a job in the Trump administration, responded to this as patriots. I mean, we talked about this before Peggy Noonan came out with this, that if people are coming in to essentially take over and blow up the government, do you want to sit in your corner and let them do it and complain about them for 4 years? Because it will be 4 years. The Republicans ain't losing any control of either House of Congress in 2 years. Or do you want to offer yourself up to be an influence that might help moderate that? So, she could be talking to people like you and me. She's more likely talking to, the Condi Rices of the world, the Jeb Bushes, the people who know how to run government, who were dissed and ditched by Trump, and who dissed and ditched him. And I mean, Peggy Noonan is concerned about the same things we are. She's concerned about Trump tweeting us into World War III, and that he clearly needs sound minds around him. And she's also, I think, concerned about the people who ran his campaign. She certainly does. I mean, this guy's, you don't want Eric Trump as Secretary of anything. And this week it came out that he was throwing Sarah Palin out, possibly as a Secretary of the Interior. I don't think you want that. I think you do want people. I mean, essentially what she's saying is this going to look like a Republican administration? It better.
Yeah, let me throw you a name, and you tell me which category this person is going to fall into. Loyalist to Donald Trump. Opportunist, Trump, anti-Trump, but now willing to work with him. Or patriot, many of whom kept away from Mr. Trump in the past. They are needed now. They have heft, wisdom, experience, and insight. When I emailed this to you, you said that you and I fall into the patriot category. That was inspiring to me, and I wonder where does Condi Rice fall? Will she be?
Well, of course, she could fall into. Well, she's not a loyalist because she didn't support him.
Noonan has no category of people who sit it out.
She's an opportunist. I mean, she could be an opportunist because Peggy Noonan defines opportunists as those who have a place in every administration. Now, she's at a much higher level. She's not a political animal. She's at she's been Secretary of State. She's clearly would be put here in that patriot category, as would any of the dozens or hundreds of conservative and Republican, and all these people who supported Clinton. She made a point to say these are people who have served in Republican administrations in intelligence, military, defense, national security, diplomacy, right? That's a lot.
Loyalist, opportunist, or patriot? Mitt Romney.
Clearly patriot.
Sarah Palin.
Well, she's a loyalist because she came out early for him, and she said she was interested in energy, and, he's thinking, I don't know if he's seriously thinking about putting her in Interior. I can't imagine, but, who knows? Maybe Omarosa will be Secretary of Interior. Don't know.
Loyalist, opportunist, or patriot? John Boehner.
Well, he'd have to be a patriot. He's not a loyalist.
Dick Cheney.
Well, I mean, Cheney would be. I think Cheney was very quiet during the election. I don't think he opposed Trump. I think Cheney had reason not to because his daughter was running for Congress and she got elected. So I think Cheney had a reason not to say much.
Paul Ryan. Thank you.
Well, the two of them had an interesting meeting the other day, although nobody near as long as his meeting with Obama. I don't know. Paul Ryan's fate may not be in Paul Ryan's hands, nor in Donald Trump's hands. Although I suppose if Trump said I Paul Ryan out, Paul Ryan would be out. Maybe the easiest way to get Paul Ryan out is to give him. Paul Ryan, by the way, would make. If you want to get rid of Paul Ryan, make him White House Chief of Staff. That'd be a great job for Paul Ryan, although they're saying Ryan Freedom. But,
We're using Peggy Noonan's 3 categories of people in Trump's America: loyalists, opportunists, and patriots. And I've got 3 more names for John. He's putting them into these categories.
I don't think Paul Ryan is those 3. He's none of the above.
Paul Ryan's none of the above. What about Rahm Emanuel?
Rahm Emanuel is very upset because he now has to stay in Chicago. He's not going to get a job with Hillary.
Opportunist? Is that the word?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Rahm Emanuel doesn't. Because Trump's not going to look to. Frankly, Rahm Emanuel needs Trump right now because there's been a move here in Chicago. The sign, the street sign right in front of Trump Tower. They've already taken the Trump name off of it. So a lot of people who run this city are very unhappy with Trump. And Chicago was concerned that it's going to lose a lot of federal funds because Trump's going to pay Chicago back. So right now, actually, Rahm Emanuel may need to be an opportunist and come in with a bottle of champagne or send some flowers and candy or something because if his political fate now is tied to Chicago, he's going to have to make sure that the Trump administration doesn't gut this city.
What's that?
You're throwing Rahm Emanuel out was actually a much savvier notation than I initially thought.
Loyalist, opportunist, or patriot? Newt Gingrich.
Loyalist, really.
And finally, loyalist, opportunist, or patriot? David Duke.
Oh, God. Well, loyalist on one level, but if he's sniffing around for a job, that makes him an opportunist. And he said this was one of the happiest days of his life. So, I think Donald Trump may be back to saying David Duke. I don't know David Duke. Who's David Duke?
My mother told me at a very young age, you are the company you keep. And
yes.
To some extent that is correct. And I never stood with her. And this is what we get for people like me. I cast my protest vote in the state of Vermont that was called by Fox News within seconds of the poll closing.
Yes.
So I didn't feel like I was really throwing the election. I would have acted more strategically if we were in one of the states that John named earlier, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or a whole lot of other ones. You're listening to Trigger Warnings, Challenging Talk Radio, Radical Empathy. That's who we are. I'm Chris Smith, and he's John Ross, and
Yes, I am.
I don't have a second article. I only have this song because I don't know what else to do. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. John, what will we talk about next week before we get to this song?
God knows. I don't know.
You,
Protesters, maybe Trump asked Obama to be the chief of staff. I don't know. I don't know.
so in 1936, the team
Yes.
of Rodgers and Hart wrote the musical On Your Toes. And one number in that show, 1936 Rodgers and Hart musical On Your Toes. It's a duet between a high society patron of the arts and a debutante, and it's set in Russia. I got this from. I bought a record album yesterday, and it's fantastic. I don't have the folks' name in front of me, but the Dallas 1960 Cocktail Lounge, husband and wife team, and they performed the song Too Good for the Average Man. So I looked it up online. I found a blogger had written about it. The blogger's name is Jamie Weinman. And in Jamie's discussion of the song Too Good for the Average Man, the song holds up pretty well in the sense that many of the enjoyments and fads it describes are still mostly the province of the affluent. And many of the observations, like the line about rich women having easier access through family planning or the plastic surgery joke, could be made today with no change whatsoever. The one thing that doesn't hold up is the joke about rich people being overweight. John, does that rich people being overweight joke hold up? Will you go there?
No, rich people tend to be not to be overweight because they have good medicine and good food and good care.
Okay, lyrics by Larry Hart, 1936, first verse. I'll read it. John's going to tell us what it means. When Russia was white, it was white for the classes and red for the masses. Unfortunate asses. All wealth belonged to few. When England was Tudor, the king and his cronies had cocktails at Tony's, the poor had balonies, and that's how England grew.
No, the poor had baloney, not balloons.
Balonies, that's what I said, balonies.
Baloney.
More than one baloney. Sing la and huzzah for the poor folks, as long as the poor folks are your folks. John, is this historically accurate?
For the most part, it is because the White Russians lost. They got their asses kicked by the Red Russians because they kept dragging the Red Russians into war and down the line of poverty and depravity. And privation, depravity too. So yeah, that's true. They did lose, and of course we supported the White Russia when we actually went into Russia during World War I, the Russian Revolution, to fight against the Red. So that's true. England, yeah, I mean, it's always been the rich taking the poor down the path and then pushing the poor against each other. Absolutely.
All right, we move on to verse 2 of the Roger.
The lyrics in this are great. I mean, Lorenz Hart really wrote some great lyrics.
Yeah, I need to learn this song for sure. The second verse: finer things are for the finer folk. Thus society began. Caviar for peasants is a joke. It's too good for the average man. Supper clubs are for the upper folk, packed like sardines in a can. Through the smoke you can get your check and choke. It's too good for the average man. Each poor man has a wife he must stick to. Rich men have a different habit. To be caught in flagrant. What am I saying?
In flagrante delictu.
Why don't I'll let you. Here's that line. John's going to carry the rest of the verse. Each poor man has a wife he must stick to. Rich men have a different habit. John, take it.
Oh, you want me to do the rest? I was looking up something. Wait, you called me?
To
Okay.
be caught in flagrante delictu is much too good for the. I got it. Is much too good for the average rabbit. All night parties, drinking like a lord, fit into our social plan. Waking in the alcoholic ward is too good for the average man. What were you looking up?
I was going to say exactly what in flagrante delicto meant.
Please,
but it's
please.
It's being caught in the act. But in flagrante delicto means you're being caught in the act of sexual wrongdoing, essentially. So that's for the rich.
Is there a Latin phrase for being caught in the act and quid pro quo at the same time?
It could be.
I would like to make one. Next week, I'll reveal.
The literal definition of in flagrante delicto is in blazing offense. So it's a legal term that is used to indicate that a criminal has been caught in the act of committing an offense, or as we would say, red-handed. Yeah, I mean that's okay for rich people. I mean, remember, I used this reference a couple weeks ago when I said that Thurgood Marshall's most infamous quote was that he said, "I wish to die in the hands at the gun of a jealous husband." That was his dream, that he wanted to be in flagrante delicto, because that was privilege to be able to do that. Yeah, I'm with you. It's all there. It's brilliant. This is brilliant language.
I'm wondering if the phrase in flagrante delictu has something to say about reality television, in that you're catching Americans in the act, and we even saw reality television become something that was not a populist adventure, but in fact a billionaire. That's how we got here. Oh, this song is very true. Again, this is 1936, Larry Hart musical On Your Toes. The song is too good for the average man. Here's the last verse. Look out, folks. Trigger warning on the gender. Rich old age can blossom like a rose. Plastic surgeons can have a plan. Cutting off your face to spite your nose is too good for the average pan. Fancy foods are for the fancy taste. Diets for the poorer man. Gaining too much weight below the waist is too good for the average can. Lots of kids for a poor wife are dandy. Girls of fashion can be choosy. Birth control and the modus operandi are much too good for the average floozy. Psychoanalysts are all the whirl. Rich men pay them all they can. Waking up to find that he's a girl is too good for the average man. Whew. 1936 here on Trigger
Well, it
Warnings.
was the heart of the Depression, So we did have, there was clearly, the social and economic inequities were clearly quite significant here. So this is certainly reflected in this little ditty.
So do you believe there will be a resurgence and rise of populist musical theater during Trump's America?
I am going to withhold that, because there was an article that was done several months ago by the arts and entertainment critic for the Chicago Tribune that spoke to what would culture look like in Trump's America. And I kept it, and I said, "Oh, it's not going to happen." So I got rid of it. I got to find it, because it's highly relevant to this. Because what this critic suggested is that there may be there may be stuff of this nature, but that that part of the Trump agenda, he suggested, would be to winnow away at all provocative, especially anti-Trump art. And in fact, if you heard what, again, Omarosa, who was on his reality show, who was on The Apprentice, who was his outreach coordinator to the African-American community, where he did better than Romney, by the way, she said that when he's president, anybody who ever doubted him will feel the sting of power. And boy, I don't care whether it comes from a short German man with a funny mustache or a tall black woman with big hair, but when I hear things like that, it scares the bejesus out of me.
Wait. Will the ACLU become the new NRA?
There's your progressive Tea Party.
Not mine, but
Well,
I like that idea. What do you think of that? The ACLU makes a comeback.
I think that what is likely to happen, both historically in American politics, it happened in the Bush administration, and especially given the personality of the president-elect, is that Trump and the Republicans will go way too far, too soon, and they will be excoriated for it, and they will pay for it politically.
Like impeachment. Impeachment is what you're saying.
Well, no, I mean, I think impeachment is so unlikely for 4 years, given that Republicans will have an overwhelming majority in the House, and that they have a solid majority in the Senate that is only going to grow in 2 years because the Democrats have to defend something like 25 of 34 seats. So,
but wait a minute. I like what you're saying. I think it's very, very plausible. Will Trump go too far, too fast, too soon?
I don't mean impeachment. I mean the voters will let them know. Now, there is a big wild card here, and it's about 2.5 weeks away, which is the Trump University trial, and Trump has to testify on the 28th, the Monday after Thanksgiving.
You think that's going to do anything? Really?
I think they are going to work like hell to get this thing thrown out of court with a settlement, name your price, as soon as they can.
No. If our American ignorance is honed and perfected towards anything, it's higher education, man. I don't think the story's going to have legs at all. I think people don't get it. They don't. It's
not a question of whether the story has legs. It's a real trial.
So you know what's the end game? What do you think's going to happen? I didn't think it was a game changer. I thought it was going to be dismissed. In Donald Trump's America, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to have information on it. You're telling me now about it.
It's a trial. It's been on the docket for months, and he has to testify on the 28th. He has to testify. He is, he can't get out of it. No, this is a very serious case. It's fraud. It's all kinds of stuff. This could be very bad. Now, again, I don't think there's a chance in hell, no matter what he does, that he'd be impeached because the Republicans control everything. But
unless the GOP wants Pence.
Well, I mean, clearly, I think the Republican establishment would love Mike Pence. Mike Pence is a true conservative, hardcore. They know what to expect from him. And, Trump offered John Kasich the job to do all the work of government while he made America great again. So, whatever that is, Trump's going to be a figurehead, and others are going to be the, running things out. Again, I don't know.
Yeah, for
But
as long as they allow him to be a
I would not
figurehead.
dismiss. I would not dismiss, this trial on Trump University. Because it's a serious thing.
Well,
It's a serious thing with many, many people on, that have joined the lawsuit.
and what do you think?
And,
The GOP is going to disown him because, say he's found guilty? Like,
yeah,
I mean,
I don't know.
I
And all I'm saying is that it is a it's a serious case. It's a real case. It's not, not Judge Judy.
will Trump appoint Judge Judy to the Supreme Court?
Well, Christopher Buckley wrote a great book about this, about exactly that. A president who has no interest in being president anymore, who appoints a TV judge to the Supreme Court. So there's precedent. Except the problem is that, from what we understand, Trump doesn't read books. So who knows? No, it would not be Judge Judy. It might be Judge Janine Pirro. She might get an appointment.
All right. Well, we've covered it, as Howard
Will
Stern
any of the
says.
Duggar family get an appointment?
The who?
Any of the Duggars? Will they get a job?
I don't know who you're referring to.
The Duggars are the reality show folks from Arkansas with 27 kids, and all the names start with J. And because Mike Huckabee has been announced and Mike Huckabee probably would be a very useful cabinet secretary. I don't know what he'd run, what agency he'd run, but
That's enough. That's enough. We'll stop there. We've got to stop there. This has been Trigger Warnings, Challenging Talk Radio. Radical empathy charging forward in Trump's America. Radical empathy. Treating each other the way we'd like to be treated. Calling for protest, but calling for peaceful protest. Correct, John? Civil disobedience?
I guess. I don't know. I think it should be peaceful, but I don't think anybody should back off. I think, I think.
Don't back off?
Time.
Did you say not to back off?
I don't think people should shy away from protesting. I think they should go out and do it. And, I think it's okay.
Are you going to protest?
In my own way, I might.
I'd like to. Well, I've got an opportunity for you. A peaceful protest opportunity. Call and.
Remember, Chris, I'm a patriot.
I know. And here's something patriotic. This is not a brick through a window, but in fact, protesting at the source of the problem. What you do is, John, do you have a pen and paper?
Yes,
okay.
But I have to get going.
Well, please get ready. I'd like you to write down this phone number. Ready?
Okay.
954. Did you get that?
I got it.
384 2225. One more time. That's 954
384-2225.
That's right. So what you do to protest, call that number, 954-384-2225, and ask for Debbie, and let her know how excited you are.
Know who that is. No, I know who that is.
Again, that's 954-384-2225. Ask for Little Debbie Wasserman Schultz and let her know how excited you are about moving forward in Trump's America. If you'd like to send cards, thank you cards, postcards, I sent a lovely postcard today, John, to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and it depicted women in front of their boarding house in late 19th century Lowell, Massachusetts. And so please send cards and letters to 4479 Fox Glove Lane, Weston, Florida 33331. Again, 4479 Foxglove Lane, Weston, Florida 33331.
This is all part of a telethon. I know. I didn't know
It is. Well, next week we start a telethon for Chelsea 2020 here on Trigger Warnings. Get ready, neoliberals, because we've got exactly what you thought you wanted. If you still want to stand with her and you've been wandering around in the woods hoping for your opportunity, we'll give you that next week. We'll take your calls and pledges towards Chelsea 2020. Right, John?
Or Charlotte. Because he was the chair of the DNC. He was a pretty good outsider chair.
You know who would be a great chair? Peter Shumlin. Nobody likes him. Nobody trusts him. He doesn't know shit. And he was allowed to be the chair of the Democratic Governors Association for about an hour and a half.
There are only 12 Democratic governors in the whole country.
Right.
That's
right. Well, look, if you're in our listening audience and you've got thoughts on who should be the next Democratic chair, call 954-384-2225. Ask for Debbie. I'm sure she's still on the inside. Right?
She did get reelected, although not by much.
I'm sure she's still on the inside. All right, well, look, we're going to wrap it up here on Trigger Warnings. He's John Ross. I'm Toast. But we all are.
And by the way, folks, if you see a short, tired lady walking through the woods, stop and shake her hand.